Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's discussion. Now, today we're going to talk about data centers. Now, in the news recently, we've seen a lot of buzz about load shedding, data centers being built here and there. So we need to understand, why do we need it? How is it going to affect us? What are data centers in the first place? And that kind of stuff. Okay. So let's get into it. My name is Sam Odoi. Techcipe is where we design solutions for you. Okay, we design tech recipes for you to use. Now, the tech recipes we design will be implemented somewhere in a data center. Now, one of the tech recipe we design, for example, is for your website, for your emails, and stuff like that. So these, and if you want me to explain what our website is, you need to refer to the other video that Kemani did. We have not done it at Techcipe. But anyway, let's have a discussion about data centers. Karibu. Let's start by asking ourselves, what is a data center? Now, it is good for you to know that we already have data centers in Kenya, even as we speak. Now, a data center is where data is stored, just like the word says. I'm not going to give you a scholarly definition. I'm just going to give you the definition of a data center from the perspective of the application perspective. Okay, so a data center is simply an engine room where your data resides. If you have gone to a website, if you are opening any application, for example, that application, when you typed, for example, techcipe.com, right? When you go to that website, or you go to eGov or whatever website, or facebook.com, where does that website reside? Where is it stored? It is stored somewhere in a computer. That computer is in a data center, and that computer is referred to as a server. Okay? So why are data centers important? Because this website that you are accessing needs a place where it is secure, where there are no interruptions in terms of network access. Basically, I don't want to go to Facebook and then it is not working, or Instagram. Okay, the other thing, so to make it accessible, the network has to be reliable. The power in terms of electricity has to be reliable and has to be always available. Okay. The other aspect now is, there are many other aspects. Now, when you talk about, for example, power and these many computers, because it's not only one computer, just imagine all the websites that are in the world and all the data that we potentially access on our phones, on our computers and everything. Wherever they are stored, you can imagine in this big room, we have thousands of computers. Let's say a data center has, say, around 10,000 servers. Now, these 10,000 servers, your computer, when you're using it, it generates heat. How much more does 1,000 or 10,000 computers generate? And we're talking about servers. So we therefore need cooling. Okay? So the data center encompasses all these aspects of power reliability, cooling, network reliability, and security. Security in terms of physical security, and a bit of logical security. So that nobody can just break in and potentially steal the server, right? Which in effect, they can steal your data in that manner. Okay. So that is basically a general description of what a data center is and why it is relevant that we have one, so that you can get a place to store your data. Let's look at the types of data centers based on the usage. Okay, so we are building data centers for cloud storage. Now, when you think about cloud storage, it is simply somebody else storing your data. You don't know where it is, so that's why we abstractly call it the cloud storage. Okay, so now this cloud storage, it could be hyperscalers. Hyperscalers are people like AWS, that is Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google, and all that. They build the data centers that they use for the data that they store, whether it is corporate data or whatever those services work on nazo. That data center is called a hyperscaler. It basically is a massive, stores like massive levels of data. Okay. Then we have alt cloud, alternative clouds. So basically alternatives to the hyperscalers. No, these are people who, mostly the people who will consume these services are SMEs or companies that do not have a very big budget. Okay, think about DigitalOcean, for example. Think about OVH. Think about Hetzner, Germany. Think about Voltra. I mean, the examples are many. I'm not giving anybody that I mentioned a stamp of authority. I'm just giving random examples of what comes to mind. But those are alt clouds. Now, what's the difference between these two clouds? Hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft Azure, they have built in a lot of reliability into their infrastructure and their service, and even how they structure the services. I mean, you Azure, for example, or AWS, you can potentially do thousands of it has like thousands of functions in terms of technical capability. Alt cloud are simpler to configure. They are more direct in this sense. They have, to some extent, you can even get a bare metal computer. Bare metal computer is just, I can go to the shop, buy a server, come with it, hook it to my house somewhere in a corner, maybe in my own, let's say, it's not a, we cannot call it a data center, my own server room somewhere in the house, and then I start getting, configuring it for some services. I can host my website there and all that. So alt clouds, I can even go and hire that server. Instead of buying a server, I can hire this server from the alt cloud and essentially configure it as if I bought it and brought it to my house, or I bought it and took it to a data center physically for them to store it for me. So if you think about now the data centers that are there, we can, based on functionality, we can broadly categorize them as that. Hyperscalers, alt cloud. Okay. We also have other categories in terms of usage that we can say. For example, we have for network purposes, how your internet traverses. We have data centers that store what we call an IP exchange. So this is where, various networks. For example, if we are doing a YouTube live, for example, that data from here has to go all the way to US. How does it get there? Now, it goes through my ISP in this building. Then my ISP will hand it over to another ISP. That one will hand it over to another ISP, and it will eventually get to the ISP in US that is serving the data center that belongs to YouTube. So there are also data centers that also now handle the ISPs and the network level aspects of it. This discussion is inspired by what is going around the media. So you've seen discussions about, we are setting up a data center, or there is a potential to set up a data center. If I'm not wrong, it is a 1 gigawatt data center in Kenya. Okay, of course, there is promise of load shedding as a result of the demand that this data center requires and all that. So we're going to skew this discussion a bit to answer some of the questions that you may have, or at least to shed light on why this discussion is key, and also to put some facts to it. Okay, so we are not too carried away by some of these happenings or some of these things that are being thrown around. Now that we know what a data center is, we know the kind of data centers that we can potentially build in terms of demand, and there are many. I just focused on 3. Why then is it important for us as a country in Kenya to build a data center? I mean, why have a data center in the first place? Now, we already know that the data center can store. We need to store our websites, we need to store applications and all that. But why specifically as a country in Kenya do we need to build a data center? Now, one of the upsides of having one is this. If we build a data center here, we're going to have people hosting their services here, which in turn is going to inject some money. So we are basically exporting a service. We are exporting a hosting service, say, to our neighboring countries or the African countries, or even anybody else. Now, if we decide to build a hyperscale data center, that means AWS, Amazon, the likes of Google, and in this case, the discussion is around Microsoft. So that is Microsoft Azure. So if we decide to build an Azure hyperscale data center, that means that the world can potentially consume Microsoft services, whatever they consume, whether it is Azure, OneDrive, and all that, they can consume those services, and those services are being served from here. So, out of the 1 billion USD that they are going to pay for those services, a very small fraction is going to come to Kenya, either through the people who are, the employees who are being paid to do the job, or even the taxes and all that. So there's a potential, there's an economic benefit to it. The details of that and the mechanisms of that, we can go into it later. If we decide to build an alt cloud or another data center, an alt cloud, for example, if we decide to build an alt cloud, again, same concept. We are going to have economic gain from it, right? Because we are exporting our services. Now, what is relevant for us in Kenya, or what is actually practical if we think about it? Now, you have to look at, data centers are not built like roads. Mostly we build a road, then we say, let's build thicker road, the cars will come. Let's build, your MP is probably building a road in your village, but mostly the cars might not come. So these are, and the motivation for building that road is mostly not economic, because we would rather build that road elsewhere, probably, but because your MP or your governor or whoever wants to, is trying to become popular and wants to push a certain narrative, then they build a road that basically does not make economic sense. Now, we cannot make the same mistake with a data center. Why is this? Already, we have to think about Kenya and Africa, because if we build a data center here, the relevance of it being here is Kenya and also the African space. Are we mature enough for a hyperscale environment? Answer is no. We are not there yet. We do not have the enough demand. How many companies can pay to have all their data residing in AWS or all their data residing in Azure, Microsoft Azure? Not very many. There are many other factors. Our politics is here and there. Our policymakers are very spontaneous, right? If you think about taxes, it's not very predictable. If you are to build such a data center here, you need predictability for at least 15 years, right? Can we really sit down and say our taxes will be predictable for the next 15 years? If we borrow from history, can we say our say the currency, the FX, the foreign exchange, can we say our USD will be sticky at this value or whatever? Can we really predict for the next 15 years how it will be? Can we also, again, predict the power consumption and actually guarantee the power that we are giving to this data center? Because remember, whatever is on the news is we are building a 1,000 megawatt data center. So what that means is if we build a 1,000 megawatt data center, this demand is normally peak demand. Like, it has to be guaranteed. It's not like your house or my house where if I lose power, it's okay. So I am not guaranteed. This one is guaranteed. It has to be there continuously all the time. We have some good things going for us. Our power is around 85% green, so we are doing very well in the world. However, it is 85% of what? What is the capacity we have? We have around 3,800 megawatt, which of capacity, and you have to think about this capacity in this sense. This is like you have to think about this capacity in a sense. It is like we are farming maize, but this maize is probably somewhere in Eldoret. We have 1 ton of maize in Eldoret, or 3.8 tons of maize globally in Kenya, but we have 1,000 ton in Eldoret, another 1,000 ton in Mombasa, but we have another 1,000 probably in Kitale, not in Kitale, in say Central, but maybe the road network between here and accessing that 1,000 ton is not very good. So even if we have it, the road network is not very good, so we cannot really benefit from it on demand. Okay, so there are many challenges that we would need to sort first locally in Kenya, challenges internally, then also the demand, challenges in terms of economics, the demand for that kind of an investment. We do not have it, to be very honest. Now, we also, another point to note is this: we are talking about building a 1,000 megawatt data center. 1,000 data center is a capacity. 1,000 megawatt data center is a capacity. How this is typically built is built in batches. So if you think about it, it is like we want to build a warehouse where we can potentially store 10 tons of maize. But we are not able, I mean, the market is not demanding for 10 tons of maize at once, right? So essentially, once we build this data house, we would build it in phases in a way that we are going to deliver or is going to demand, maybe the first demand is going to be 100 bags, 100 bags per time. So essentially, in terms of data center, we would build it on a phased basis where we are delivering, say, 100 megawatts of power or 50 megawatts of power. So 100 batch, so that within a period of, say, 10 years or 15 years, we have essentially achieved the 1,000 megawatt capacity for this data center. So it is not something that we are delivering all at once. So we don't need the investment to essentially build the whole thing on day one and deliver on day one, right? With that in mind, my proposal would be, let us not focus on building a hyperscale data center. It is good if Microsoft is willing, which I'm not sure, and I really hope, fingers crossed, that they invest their billions here for their hyperscale data center. But I don't know whether it's going to materialize. However, what is more practical for us is to build a data center that we can use for our local use case, our African use case. Okay, this can be hosted if you're thinking about, for example, a data center where other companies can host their data, their CRMs, their websites, their all these kind of things. Then we can build a very good data center here and invite the alt clouds, the alternative clouds, the DigitalOceans and all that to host their data here. We would be, in Africa, we would be among the first regions for some of these providers. And we would definitely be, it would raise there's local demand for that. There's also demand that we can, imported demand, if we can say, there's imported demand for that. So economically, it makes way more sense to do this. Now, in terms of networks, our networks are maturing very fast. We are very well placed to serve even our neighbors. So in terms of networks, a data center still makes sense to build a data center to serve, maybe to bring the networking needs of our locals closer. If you think about a company like M-Pesa has had to build its own data centers. That means they actually invested a lot of money to build these data centers to host, M-Pesa and those other applications that you, the mama mboga, the boda boda guy, and even the banker and whoever else, every Kenyan uses, for example, right? So if we had this data center and a very reliable data center, and they were able to consume these services for a fraction of the costs, that means they don't need to build a data center, they don't need to spend all this money, then essentially over a period of time, they would reduce, for example, the costs, the transaction cost. They would reduce the transaction cost, the services would be faster, we would have there will be more innovation around these technologies so that we are consuming, we are gaining a lot of benefit from them, and they are able to pass this value to us because it does not cost them too much. Okay, if you think about an application like eCitizen, for example, eCitizen right now, not everything is on eCitizen. Where they store their data currently is more expensive. If we were able to bring it to, say, a fraction of the cost, let's even say whatever they spend on all this, we bring it to, say, half or a tenth of the cost, 1 out of 10. Come on, if you are using 10 shillings, they're going to use 1 shilling, then definitely the e-citizen services will be faster, they will be cheaper. Okay, then we're also going to have other private companies and a lot of innovation around such services. So think about it. For example, if e-citizen, it is handling our medical services, right? And the people who are relying on dialysis, for example, sometimes they have frustrations where you go to a facility, you're used to going for dialysis there, but there is a technical problem. Maybe the machine is not working or whatever it is. What if this person had an app, for example, or some place they can go and check, where else can I go? And immediately they're able to book a slot in 20 kilometers from where they are, because this is not public information. They don't have this information. So you can think about it in terms of what kind of innovations would come up as a result of this now affordable service, right? So over, say, a period of 10 years, 15 years, you'd really have a lot of benefit. The other thing, of course, with having this thing here is we are going to have more engineers, right? Now, currently, where this data is sitting, they are paying engineers and all those staff required to do that. They are paying them a lot of money. So there's also the direct benefit of having people working for these companies, whether directly or indirectly, because they need a lot of staff. You need a significant amount of people to manage this. So these engineers, we're going to have our institutions training up more engineers. These engineers will be able to create solutions relevant to us, as we said. Even if they're going to leverage AI, they're going to have applications relevant to us and solving our problems. So your child, as Mama Mboga or that Boda Boda guy, will have better opportunities, whether in terms of employment or innovation as an entrepreneur or whatever. So there's a lot of benefit if we were to actually achieve building such a product and build it in a sustainable way, right? So it is not just we are not building it as a PR stunt. We are building it really having looked at the whole scope of the benefits and the long-term gains. So let's think about it. What if you are an institution, you are an SME currently, probably you are a car dealer somewhere, probably you are a farmer somewhere, you are a large scale farmer. Now, if we build this thing, you even have, I'm sure you have a website, you probably have an email that is info@yourself.com, for example. You need all these services. So all these services that you are handling, including your finance system and all that, if you host it in Kenya, it would be tremendously cheaper than hosting it elsewhere. So as a company, you make a saving on your spend on all these services that you're consuming. So you're able to extend that even to your customers, and you're able to get more business and even do more. Basically provide more value to the people you're serving. You may be asking yourself, what is the cost of putting up such an infrastructure? So first of all, the government has, in my opinion, no business whatsoever building a data center for us. That is the work of the private sector. Now, how would that work? And what is the government's role? The government's role is purely to create an environment such that the investor is going to deem it fit for them to build this data center. Now, we have a few data centers that are coming up here and there, and the current setup of the data center, of the ones that are being built, so you'll find, for example, a 20 megawatt data center is being built. For example, I think IEX built a 22 point something capacity data center. So you're talking about multiplying this factor by what? Is it 100 or 50, right? You're talking about multiplying this factor by 50, for example. So those are the people that need to build a data center. What's the government role? The government's role is to create the avenue, a friendly environment. What is the friendly environment? Power. So the government will need to invest in good power. It is okay. We agree our power cannot support that yet. We are consuming around 2,300. We are producing around 3,800. So we are not there yet, right? And there are many factors to the whole math. You cannot just do a supply minus production equation and say we have enough power. No, we don't have enough power. But we can build slowly towards it. Now, what is the second thing? They produce the power. They create a good environment for power. Then they reduce the bureaucracies. I mean, if an investor wanted to potentially do such a thing, then reduce the bureaucracies, fix the, for example, the forex exchange. You know, we do not want 1 minute it is 200, the next minute it is, by the way, it never goes down. So it is 200, the next minute it keeps going up. No, no, no. If we can fix it, that would be good. The next thing is taxes. Don't be too, we need the government not to be too touchy-feely with the taxes. You know, they wake up, they create a new tax here, another tax here. Of course, that is not friendly for the potential investor who would put the kind of investment we are talking about to put up this facility, okay? Yeah, so in terms of cost, I think we don't have to worry too much. We would only request the government to not do its usual thing, but this time to be a bit frugal. And in any case, who said we need to borrow the money? I mean, if we really look at how we are spending our money, if we are a bit more frugal, if we are honest to ourselves and we don't eat everything that we are getting, we can build this from pocket because currently we are generating that money. So a myth out there is that if they build this data center, you know, the government is going to steal our data. I don't know who is going to steal our data. Wait, you're already giving out your data. So now you're worried about somebody stealing your data that you're freely giving to them already. Topic for another day, but I can assure you, the way you operate online currently, your data is already out there, and you are already not very serious with your data. So don't worry about, if you're worrying about, someone is going to steal your data, then they already have it, and you're continuously feeding it to them. However, you may have a point when it comes to your data privacy. We have to look at what is happening out there. Companies are getting into a very predatory place in terms of how they sell things to us. Now, go and check online. There is a certain car company where you buy a car and you have to pay an annual fee so that you can access the seat warming feature of your car. So you have bought the car with your money, but there are features you cannot unlock because you have not paid a certain fee. Okay. Go and check something else. There is a company that is selling printers. You go and buy the printer, you go and buy the ink, but you cannot print. Why? Because you have not paid a certain monthly subscription to the owner of the company. So they are hiding it. There's something called a digital rights management, a DRM. So basically how we license whatever we use. Now they are taking it a notch higher. Now, whether we build a data set, those kind of predatory behaviors from the big companies, the big tech companies, or even small upcoming companies may potentially affect you. But guess what? They will affect you whether we build a data center in Kenya or you're consuming the service with a data center in Europe. So, topic for another day. But if you think about data, you probably are safer thinking about it in those lines than somebody stealing your data. There's a third perspective. We don't already trust the government potentially with our data. Now, US, for example, a lot of our data is hosted in US. Now, in US, for example, the government has the right to consume, for example, let's say iPhone, for example. There was a case, and you can look it up. There was a case where terrorists took a selfie with an iPhone, and the government was not able to access this iPhone. Even the company itself could not unlock the phone for the government to access it. So they changed the law such that we, as a government, demand for this data, then the company, because it is domiciled in our country, in US, then they should be able to give us this data. That is, of course, within the confines of the law and a lot of caution. We have to ask ourselves, can we employ the same caution and the same metric? That is, do we have the ethics to employ the same caution and the same procedures to data in Kenya, that is in Kenya, even if we put the laws. That is up to you. Your guess is as good as mine. So there are potential risks here and there, but I mean, they should not deter us from putting up this investment. Whatever teething problems will come, I think let us deal with them when we have money in our pockets and the muscle to fight those teething problems. Another potential myth is taxes. So you may be thinking, once the government invests in, for example, building more, increasing our power capacity or building whatever data centers we're talking about, then they're going to tax you. Of course, of course, that makes sense. That is actually not a myth. Potentially, the government may tax us. And this is not because it makes sense, like, it's actually going to consume our taxes and all that. No, there are other ways this can be done. We know that. But as we know, there's always the opportunity to dig into your pockets deeper. So that is a potential risk. I really cannot, I don't have any other explanation to tell you, but that is actually something that can affect us. So anyway, thank you so much for listening this far. I hope you've learned something new, or I hope you have gotten a different insight about the discussion that is going on about data centers, about our power levels, and why we need to increase our power production in the country or to build more data centers. I hope you have learned something in general. My name is Sam Udoi. It's been an absolute pleasure to share these insights with you. See you in the next one.